Like, all day long, we were bombarded with ridiculous notions that, like, oh, this game is a masterpiece. Oh, look at me play this game. Oh, look at how great it is. And now that the hype session is over, much like Temtem before it, the game is completely forgotten.
So originally I was not planning to make another video on this guy, the Nintendo fanboy Harmon Smith. However, the take he has in this video is so bad that I just can't go without responding to it, because it is downright delusional. Recently a game a lot like Pokemon and a lot like Ark Survival Evolved as well, called Palworld, has exploded on Steam, getting 8 million sales in less than a week and having 2 million concurrent active players, which is the world record behind PUBG in terms of concurrent players on Steam on a single game. And this game seems to be bringing a lot of controversy, especially on Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, and any other site where people really talk about gaming. The main group of people upset by this game are Nintendo/Pokemon fanboys, and that is exactly what we're looking at today, a Pokemon/Nintendo fanboy that cannot cope with the success of Palworld.
So last night I did a warning stream talking about Palworld, the game that the indie YouTube scene is pretending is like gonna be the Pokemon killer, is gonna be some big thing.
I have not seen a single person on the internet claim that Palworld was going to be the Pokemon killer. No, it's a game a lot like Pokemon. I'd honestly say it's a lot more like Ark. But nobody is here claiming that this game is going to kill Pokemon, because that just is not a realistic expectation.
It has 500,000 concurrent players on Steam.
Yeah, the record is no longer 500,000 concurrent players on Steam. The record is now 2 million concurrent active players on Steam. Thought I'd go ahead and update you there.
It's sold over 1 million copies. It's over for the Pokemon Company.
It didn't sell over 1 million copies, it sold over 8 million copies, and once again, nobody is claiming that it is over for the Pokemon Company.
It's over for Nintendo, right? I talked about what people were gonna do. And, yeah, I was right. Like, all day long, we were bombarded with ridiculous notions that, like, oh, this game is a masterpiece. Oh, look at me play this game. Oh, look at how great it is. And now that the hype session is over,
the hype for this game is definitely not over. Every single time I get on a social media platform and there's somebody talking about gaming, they are talking about Palworld. Every time I get on Twitter, Palworld is trending. The hype for this game is definitely not over, as much as you want to believe it is.
Much like Temtem before it, the game is completely forgotten.
Imagine being so delusional that you think the biggest game on the internet right now, one of the most played games at the moment, one of the best-selling games at the moment, has been forgotten. I'm sorry, but if this game is forgotten, then what the fuck happened to Scarlet and Violet? Because I guarantee you there's more people playing and talking about Palworld than Scarlet and Violet.
It is dwindling in popularity.
It's actually the exact opposite. The game is skyrocketing in popularity, hitting new records every single day, and the sales are just going up and up and up and up and up at such a high pace.
More and more people are starting to notice, like, what's going on, the game is being shilled.
I'm sorry, but for you to sit here and call somebody else a shill is the most ironic thing in the world. Like, talk about the pot calling the kettle black.
You know, YouTubers aren't exactly the biggest advocates for game quality anyway, right? They just jump onto trends.
You don't get to talk about people advocating for game quality when you sat here and defended Scarlet and Violet.
Right? So with that in mind, with what's been going on, like, what can we learn from this?
What we can learn from this is that there's still a market out there for Pokemon-style games, as proven by Palworld's success. Because of the success of Palworld, the Pokemon Company now has a fire lit up underneath their asses, and they realize that they are going to have to make a good Pokemon game unless they want to lose a portion of their players to a game like Palworld.
Right, what can we learn from this experience? Well, first of all, it doesn't seem to be possible to use the same kind of techniques to prop up a game like this that the industry uses for Baldur's Gate 3 or whatever.
The reason why it wasn't propped up like a game like, I don't know, Baldur's Gate 3 or whatever is because it is not a AAA game like Baldur's Gate 3. And it's kind of embarrassing that a not even AAA game is able to be better than the latest official Pokemon game.
Right, because Overwatch had like a similar kind of like thing where people came out and they tried screaming about, oh man, there are no colorful online shooters in this market. Overwatch is completely unique in this regard.
Overwatch absolutely is a unique game, and I'm not even someone who likes Overwatch. The game bores me to death. However, it is very unique. There were not very many games out there at the time of 2015 to 16 that were like Overwatch.
And then meanwhile, like Splatoon came out last year, was better put together, like remained relevant longer.
I like how you don't provide any source to prove that it was relevant for longer. I mean, I can go ahead and prove that it actually was not relevant for longer. This right here is Google Trends. You can put in a search term or a video game or series or whatever and see how many web searches there were for that video game series, and you can compare it to other searches. As we can see here, we had blue for Overwatch and red for Splatoon. So yeah, it definitely did not remain relevant for longer.
Right? Was more unique and creative and had more interesting characters, right?
Yeah, Overwatch definitely had much more creative and innovative characters than Splatoon. I mean, every single character literally had like 2 to 3 different abilities, I think. I can't remember. It's been a while since I played Overwatch.
Splatoon stomped Overwatch in every single way, shape, and form. But for the first 10 years, almost, yeah, about half that long, about 5 years. For the first several years, people were saying the exact opposite. Until Overwatch completely fell off a cliff, people were saying Overwatch was this big phenomenon.
If Overwatch wasn't a phenomenon, then how come it made basically the entire genre of hero shooters popular? Like, everybody was copying Overwatch at the time. It was one of the biggest competitive games out there and still does have a large player base to this day. The same cannot be said about Splatoon. Well, I don't know if it has a large player base or not, but it definitely doesn't have as big of a competitive scene as Overwatch does or ever did.
40 million players online at once or something.
Which, by the way, is almost 4 times as many as Wii U's sold, which is the console you would have to play Splatoon on.
Like that. It's one of the most popular things ever. Well, if it was so popular, it wouldn't have fallen off the way it did.
Everyone and everything falls off after a certain amount of time. No game, no person can be on top forever. Eventually, somebody is going to come and take their place, and they are going to fall off. That is how the internet works. Let me do a little comparison. The biggest YouTuber for years was PewDiePie, and everyone would watch him, right? And then eventually, after a time, he started to fall off and Mr. Beast came and took his place. That doesn't mean his content is shit or whatever, it's just the fact that you can't stay on top forever. Same goes for Overwatch. Back in 2016, it was the biggest game, but over time, it's gonna fall off and another game is gonna come in to take its place.
Okay, like, I don't understand what's so hard to understand about this. And meanwhile, like, Splatoon is still going. And
well, according to web searches for each game, Overwatch is still infinitely more popular than Splatoon is. Now, it very well could be because Overwatch is free now and Splatoon is still a paid game, but nonetheless, it's definitely not as popular as Overwatch.
To this day, people will try to do this thing that, like, Blizzard made all these mistakes, like, Overwatch was popular at one point, blah, 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 blah. But no. What actually happened is that you latched onto a trend and began supporting that trend. You began feeding into the beast. You were part of the process of pretending this game was some Game of the Year contender.
I feel like part of Harmon here is still salty about the Game of the Year 2023 or even 2022. Who cares about the Game Awards, dude? Who gives a fuck what game wins Game of the Year?
Right, when in reality, it wasn't really relevant in any way, shape, or form.
Is that why there were millions of people playing the game at any given time? Is that why it was one of the most popular games on Twitch and YouTube? Is that why it was one of the biggest competitive games out there? Like, are you just coping, or what's going on here, dude?
Overwatch is a really interesting example, because right now you can't even go back and play the Overwatch that people supposedly liked.
And the reason for that is because Overwatch 2 is basically just Overwatch 1 enhanced. It's the same game pretty much, with just some tweaks here and there. So you can pretty much still play Overwatch 1.
And you don't want to admit it, right? You don't want to admit that the game wasn't that good to begin with. So you kind of jump through hoops and make excuses and kind of justify your attitude. You kind of justify why you act this way about these products. You kind of justify why things are becoming so why these games are forgotten so quickly.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say Overwatch is far from forgotten, considering every single time you get on the PlayStation or Xbox, one of the top games you see in the store is Overwatch. It's Overwatch 2. People are playing that game, and I don't even like the game. I think it's boring as fuck, but you know, it's a popular game.
Right? Like Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, like long term, these games are not going to be relevant.
To say that Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring are not going to be relevant in years is a complete fucking cope. You know the games are still going to be relevant and talked about, you just don't want to admit it. And are you seriously still coping over the Game Awards 2022 with Elden Ring?
You know, Elden Ring is already trailing behind Dark Souls in best games ever made polls.
Okay, and this proves what exactly? That people might enjoy the Dark Souls games over Elden Ring because they're more linear? Okay, what does this prove?
Right? Elden Ring is never going to be more popular than Dark Souls. Just like Dark Souls is never going to be more popular than Skyrim. And just like how Skyrim is never going to be more popular than Zelda.
I guess he wants me to pull out the chart again. As you can see here, a quick bit of research easily disproves what he just said. Skyrim is the most popular on average out of all these games.
Right? Like, there is really nothing you can do. Right, about to establish to demolish these established Nintendo properties.
Yeah, once again, like I said before, nobody is trying to destroy Nintendo's properties here. It is simply a game that came out that is a lot like Pokemon, and considering the last Pokemon game that came out kinda sucked ass, a lot of people really enjoy it.
Right, by saying that like Palworld is going to like beat Pokemon, you would have to have a TCG, you would have to have a merchandise line, you would have to have, you know, an anime adaptation, you would have to have like all of this stuff.
Says who though? Who says there has to be an anime adaptation for a game to be successful? I mean, Elden Ring was an extremely successful game and I don't see an anime for that. At the end of the day, what people are looking for is a game that is fun. Nobody cares about all this extra shit like merchandise and all that. That's cool, like you can have that, but the main thing that people are worried about is the game enjoyable?
Like, there is no way in the world that Palworld, like a glitchy, uninspired, you know, straight up plagiarized mess, is ever gonna topple Pokemon.
I find it absolutely hilarious that he's gonna sit here and call Palworld a glitchy mess while he praises Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Also, I love this other point that Nintendo fanboys try to make. Oh my god, Palworld plagiarized Pokemon. If Palworld plagiarized Pokemon, then what the fuck did Pokemon do to Dragon Quest? Ah, I forgot. It's only okay when the company that you bootlicked does it.
And that was obvious to me from the beginning, before I even looked at what the game was and what it was like. And before I started realizing that, like, wow, these are just Pokemon designs with, like, different typings and different colors.
Just like how Pokemon are just Dragon Quest characters with different typings and colors?
Right? like, before I realized how, like, blatant it was, right? Like, I was saying that, like, this is another Temtem. This is another Yokai Watch. This is another Digimon. You know, a flash-in-the-pan thing that's relevant because, like, people desperately need Pokemon to go away so they can start claiming that Nintendo is doomed, but, like, it just isn't happening.
No, people don't want Pokemon to go away. People want Pokemon to get off their ass and make a good game like they used to make years ago. You're letting your fanboyism get in the way of the fact that Pokemon is probably going to have to put out a really good game now because of Palworld's success if they don't want to lose a portion of their player base.
Like, they're not doing anything inspired with it. Like, it's just the same thing, but ooh, you can craft. Like, that's like the stupidest, like, most basic thing you can possibly add.
So apparently crafting in video games is bad because Harmon Smith doesn't like it. I mean, I don't like racing or puzzle games. Does that mean that races and puzzles in video games are just bad because I don't like it? No, that's a stupid argument.
And now look at us, right? Gamers are doing the same thing they've done for the last several years, is prop up random games from small Chinese companies.
I don't know, if I were you, I'd be concerned about the fact that a small Chinese company can put out a better Pokemon-styled game than Nintendo themselves. That's pretty fucking bad.
Right? Like, it's the same thing over and over again. Right? Nintendo is so dominant in these kind of spaces, you know, in anything that isn't a realistic first-person shooter or like a third-person action game where you go around killing the police, right? Like, anything that isn't that, like, Nintendo is dominant in.
You mean like VR? Oh wait, Nintendo doesn't have VR, so that literally just proved your statement false.
And, like, I don't think the rest of the industry is gonna ever be able to catch up by Pokemon by putting out a clone of it. Like, it isn't gonna work. Pokemon innovates too much. They're glitch-free.
Honestly, I think you should go to a hospital. There is no goddamn way that this man sat here and called Pokemon glitch-free when the last game to come out in the Pokemon series was Scarlet and Violet, the most broken, buggy fucking game I have ever seen in my life.
They introduce new Pokemon every generation. Like, there fundamentally is no real demand for a Pokemon clone.
The thing is, Palworld is not a Pokemon clone exactly. I mean, it does have a lot of features that Pokemon has, but it also has a lot in common with Ark Survival Evolved, so it's not completely just a Pokemon clone. Also, if there was no demand, then how come Palworld sold 8 million copies in less than a week? Clearly there is a demand for the game, or else so many people wouldn't be praising, talking about, buying, and playing the game.
You know, Dragon Quest Monsters was considered a huge success when it sold 1 million units. Meanwhile, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is selling like what? Like 25 million? Right? And counting, plus the DLC, plus everything else that's happening, you know, plus the fact we're gonna get a new game, like, in the next couple of years.
The reason why Pokemon Scarlet and Violet sold so well is because it's a Pokemon game. It has the Pokemon name attached to it, so of course it's gonna sell well. Also, most Pokemon games are at least decent, so when people bought the game, I guess they were expecting it to be like the other games, at least decent, but instead they got a broken pile of shit.
Right, like, how in the world are you ever gonna compete with that? Like, how in the world can you do it? And the answer is you don't. Like, that's the reality that people really need to accept, is that, like, Pokemon, much like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, is never, ever, ever gonna be eclipsed in its niche, right? Like, it is there to stay.
Nobody is claiming that Pokemon is on their way out. The success of Palworld just shows that there is a market for this style of game.
But, like, everybody is desperate for this IP to be, like, to be taken out. Because they just have nothing else. They need this IP to fail so they can, like, have something they can complain about when it comes to Nintendo. And Palworld is just the most recent, most pathetic attempt at doing that.
People are not desperate for Pokemon to fail or anything like that. People are actually desperate for the opposite. People want to see a good Pokemon game come out. That's why when Palworld comes out and it's extremely successful, it kind of sends a message to the Pokemon company that, hey, there's still a market out here for this style of game. Let's make another good one. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say here. This is just the most insane amount of copium I've ever seen in my life. Alright, peace.